December 2025 board meeting. Thank you to the members that have continued to follow the progress of the cooperative. And we will get started with the consent agenda. Scott, did we have any questions on the consent agenda we need to address, or?
There were no questions or comments this month.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll motion to approve it.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and then all of those in favor, if you want to say aye
How
or just
about,
raise your hand.
how about discussion?
Aye.
Okay, do we have any discussion?
Yeah, I do. The last month executive session minutes reflect nothing about the conversation we had about.
I respectfully object to having this conversation in open session.
Well, it's about the minutes of last month's meeting.
Okay, and can I ask too, respectfully, Mr. Manning, why did you have any more questions before today?
I just didn't. I thought I'd bring it up at the meeting.
Well, you just texted me 5 minutes ago and said, see you next month. You weren't going to be here. So I'm confused.
Well, I had trouble with my sound. Evidently, I got it fixed. I don't think you're confused.
You weren't
Okay, well, I got my audio working, so I'm here. So
Okay.
I move the minutes be amended to reflect that part of our executive session last month.
So in the cooperative minutes, there will not be any mentions of any specific names. That is executive session discussion, and that is out of bounds for cooperative minutes.
It is. It's what occurred in executive session. The minutes should reflect what the executive session, what happened in the executive session. That's what minutes are for.
So just to move the board along, so discussion has been had. There needs to be a vote on the consent agenda, please.
So we're not going to reflect the minutes of that meeting, what happened in that meeting. Is that correct?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Robin had a motion to approve it. Dawn had a second. All of those in favor of approving the consent agenda, raise your hand.
Aye.
And aye. Okay, all those opposed. Okay, so motion carries 4-1.
All right. Thank you, Summer. So first of all, thank you, board, for your flexibility tonight and helping us steward resources responsibly. To open the meeting, I want to share 2 recent cooperative milestones with our members, just more proof that the cooperative is moving forward and delivering even better results. The mission statement is what we do. How we do it shows up in efforts like Roundup, where we've recently, with the help of our team, made some new milestones.
The goal was to have at least 500 participants by the end of the year. That has been surpassed at the 1st of December, so we're excited that members are participating in the program and assisting their neighbors.
112 members have been assisted through the program since its beginning.
I know it's really hard to ask for help, but there is many people that is willing to help.
Whenever they do get the assistance, I know I didn't personally give them the assistance, but it's rewarding from our side as well.
To me, that's the exciting part about how we do what we do. When the team rose up and they made those accomplishments, when they reached those milestones, that's the embodiment of what we're supposed to be doing as a cooperative. That is the community spirit by which we're helping neighbors help their neighbors. We went to the accounting team and we took a real challenge to them. a lofty goal to reduce the construction work in progress from 18 months to 6. It's a big goal, it was a large target, and it was certainly a worthy challenge. But we were excited about what they could do in the coming 3 years at that time.
We had 3 years to hit the goal of 6 months, and went from 18 months to 7 months, and we're very excited about that.
We closed approximately 10,000 work orders, and through their strategy and planning, we were able to accomplish that.
We've made a tremendous impact. We're not there yet. Our goal is 6, but we also had 3 years. So we're actually only a year and a half in.
It was just a comfortable, easy, knew we could do it kind of attitude.
We had the efforts from field services, the work order technicians, operations, and without the help of all those departments, we would not have been as successful as we are.
Incredibly proud of them. They have done such a good job. They've risen to the challenge. They've hit it head on. They've worked so hard to accomplish this. This wasn't easy.
What's exciting is they've got almost 2 years left and they're already 92% complete. They've already closed 11 of the 12-month gap and just 1 more month to go. So to see that almost 2 years in advance is really encouraging. It's a testimony to the work they put in so far. We've had a lot of progress over the last year and a half, and this is certainly one of them that we're also very proud of. Thank you, board, for participating in the cyber training. I appreciate your flexibility and adaptability in doing that. Next on the agenda is item number 4, the Brazos Rider, a 2025 review and a preview for 2026. So you may notice we've consistently been using this logo for several months. And I want to briefly connect this to some earlier conversations because my respect for what's already been built across the industry starting in the 1930s when rural electric cooperatives, they invested where investor-owned utilities just wouldn't go. That respect is deep. That admiration is deep for what's been accomplished with our history and our heritage, not just of Tri-County, but also for the industry. It's part of the reason, part of my personal motivation for joining the cooperative industry from the wholesale power market years ago. So with that, I care a lot about our heritage, but even with that appreciation, one simple truth stands out today. With the direction our leadership team is taking, and with the results this team is producing, one thing is very clear. Tri-County Electric's best days are in front of us. The work and the results now speak for themselves, and we're working very hard every month now to make 2039 a celebration of our centennial celebration, something really special. So at the end of this discussion tonight, I'm going to recommend that the board, my recommendation is going to be the board keeps the rider at 1.2 cents per kilowatt hour for the first half of 2026. I want to begin with the end in mind. So that's where I'm headed in this discussion. But we'll get everybody up to speed with what the rider is, recent performance, and our recommendation as we go. So we're going to quickly define what the Brazos Rider is. It's the original Winter Storm Uri debt. This is the structure before this team intervened. And as referenced last month, as well as the November 2024 member current conversations, this $485 million of debt was under 8 separate loans, and it was structured in a package that kind of kicks the can down the road. Now, what you see here is 8 loans, from 1 to 8, top to bottom. The first loan, $60 million, was due fall of 2024. The second and the third were due fall of 2025. That was $160 million total, and the first 2 were at varying interest rates. And so there were some things there that were giving us a little bit of heartburn. And so before we go too much further, I don't want to get frustrated at the lenders for this structure or anything else. The particular lenders that partnered with Tri-County Electric at that time were willing to take on risk that frankly no one else was willing or able to lend to. So this is what it was compared to when our team got to intervene. So this page right here I'm showing you was the key lender consideration. This was produced by the lender that organized these loans. And the order is no secret, and it was important to the board's auditor when they got here in 2024, a new auditor, to contact the lenders directly and to ask them some hard questions to make sure that Tri-County did not need to be painted in an ongoing concern perspective. And the lenders assured the auditors, we learned this after the fact, that they were going to give us a chance to fix this. And so that was important, but we had to sit down with them in early 2024 before we had results and explain what the plan was. So we did, without having a full appreciation for some of those things behind the scenes there. We talked to them about what we were going to do with expenses, reducing our expenses, focus on mission critical expenditures only, selling excess assets that weren't mission critical, and getting a new power supply. A new power supply is extremely important to them because just like every other cooperative or municipal, it's the largest source of expense for any distribution utility. So once we had that locked up and we shed that excess risk, that was really why that was the second thing on the list here in order of importance. What you're going to see here for number 3 is the first annual report for this team, which ended March 31st, 2025. Fortunately for us, that was a very favorable first year, showing a tremendous amount of progress. What all this added up to was, by the spring and the summer of this year, when these loans were also being evaluated, these lenders said they didn't even need to meet with us. The results spoke for themselves. There's another key component here that at that time, in 2024, the lenders put option number 4 here, the waiver of the MDSC, the Modified Debt Service Coverage Test. They introduced a temporary waiver, which I appreciate for where Tri-County was in late 2023, early 24. But as you're aware this month in our reports, Tri-County doesn't need a waiver. MDSC is now over 2.04 and climbing. And so we're proud of the work that's been done to get us to that point. So the way I'm going to paraphrase item number 4 there, that's kind of like the bumper guards at the bowling alley that prevent a gutter ball. While it was appreciated at first, this team doesn't need it. MDSC is over 2. The annual reports are clean, show tremendous amount of progress on debt reduction and interest reduction, as well as minimizing risk from a variety of factors, whether it's Winter Storm Uri, lines of credit, and other things we'll talk about. So as we move forward, some of those results have happened much earlier than we or the lenders anticipated, which has kind of led us to what you see here. Now, this is the result, and this is what was shared with the members in the fall of 2024. This is from current conversations. This outlines the loans. It talks about what we did to jump in with the board's approval to restructure loans 1 through 3 for the same cash flow to also be able to make principal payments. So this didn't cost our members more out-of-pocket money, and for the same money with a lower interest rate, we're actually able to take on principal payments on loan number 1 to show progress and bring closure to this at the end of this. So the first 3 loans, as a result of this work in late 24, finally have closure. They won't be kicked down the road anymore. That was one of the things we wanted to do for the membership, is to bring hope and finality to the Winter Storm Uri debt. So again, we'll look to do the same things as loans 4, 5, 6, and 7 come up over the next decade. So same strategy, same thing we did with the lines of credit here last month, and we'll talk about that later in this meeting. Now, additionally, on our website, there's information here in the same part where members can find information about how to connect with Tri-County's leading position with the Brazos Hardship Fund, which helps offset part of these Winter Storm Uri costs for qualifying lower income members. Now, applications are there for residential members who meet eligibility criteria. They can go in there on the website and find that, or contact us by phone or in person. Now, moving forward for what that means, there's a sample bill here, and you can see the Brazos financing rider. It's at 1.2 cents per kilowatt hour. Those are the funds used to pay the loans shown on the previous page. Now, one of the things I did when I arrived was I looked at how other electric cooperatives across the state address their Winter Storm Uri cost, including the option to retroactively securitize that debt. After evaluating that, our situation timelines were reviewed, especially with the statute of limitations approaching, and the decision was made to immediately shift all of our efforts and all of our focus towards building a solution to some of those open-termed loans. So here we sit today, looking forward to 2026 and conducting what is one of 2 required annual reviews on this topic. So what is the rider? It's that 1.2 cents that pays for those loans. It's governed by the tariff and it's monitored by the lenders. So the lenders take a look at that. They look at the tariff, they look at the bylaws, they look for anything that might impact their ability to recover their loans through that financing mechanism. In short, it's how Tri-County pays back the debt owed, and it's monitored by the lenders. So what you're also going to see here, I'm showing on the screen, is the tariff. And while the tariff is dozens of pages, I've just taken a snapshot of page 44 here. It's on our website. It hasn't always been there, but we want to be transparent. We want to be timely. And what you'll notice here is I've highlighted in yellow the portion of this that says it's recalculatable for the following 12 months, every January and June. So as we have this meeting here in December and make a decision on what the bills will be from January through June of 2026, that's why we're here today. We look at it twice a year, and it is time for that review. So now let's jump into the historical performance, compare that to this year, and we'll look ahead to 2026 so you can make an informed decision. What I'm showing now, just vertically, is the year 23, and I'll use that as an example, and you can extrapolate to the right from there. The top row is the revenue, which represents all the 1.2 cents per kilowatt hours the members paid in that year. The next row, labeled expense, represents the debt payments. That's the interest and principal, all the fees associated with that was paid to the lenders. Then the difference below there, if it's negative, the rider under collected in that year. If it's positive, the rider is over collecting in that year. And you can see 2023 started out a little bit rough, about 1.8 million under collected. But as a result of the things we talked about, refinancing loans 1, 2, and 3, and particularly with loan 1, beginning to make those principal payments, well, we did that in 2024 for the same money, making progress. You can see 24 came in a lot closer, 200,000 out of 39 million. So 2023 was negative 4.69%. 2024 was a lot better, negative 0.5%, 0.52%. And what you see in 2025 is about 10.5 actuals, 1.5 forecasts, because obviously the year's not over yet. But if we have normal type weather for December, this year we're right on track to be 0.16 over. That's about 0.1% over. Perfect there. So that's only possible because of the work of refinancing those loans in late 2024. So 2023 wasn't great. 2024 was really good. 2025 looks as perfect as it'll ever be for any utility. So that's the score so far. You could add those variances up, and it's roughly 2 million over the 3-year life so far that it's under. It is a small percent, but it is something we have to keep our eye on as you evaluate the next year and the rate. So now let's fast forward to what 2026 is setting up to look like. Based on the similar assumptions, the revenue will be about 40, the expense will be about 39.4, it'd be about a 1.0 positive variance. Remember on the last page, I showed you lifetime, it's about 2 million under. So if it's about 1 million over next year, net for the 4-year period would be under about a year. That's probably the right type of pace to keep. Now that it's barely positive, you might think it might be premature to adjust it since it does have a cumulative lifetime variance under. Ideally, over the long term, you want the skew, the number of times it's over and the number of times it's under, to be about even and offset. So it's not something you want to oversteer on too much or too often. So with this in mind, what 2026 could look like with about 1 million positive, offsetting 2 million under, that goes into a lot of our logic for why we would say our recommendation is that the board not adjust the rider at this time keep it at 1.26, at least for the first half of 2026, please. So that's the recommendation. Summer, as you asked earlier, I didn't receive any questions this week about the topic. If anything has come up since then, I'm happy to try to address it if I can. But that's the information. It's consistent with what we've been showing. And so at this time, if the board would choose to make a motion to vote, I will let you all do that.
Okay, so this is basically, we need a motion to keep the rider the same. Is that correct, Scott? Or raise it? Okay. So do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to maintain the rider based on the information presented today.
Okay, do we have, so the motion was made by Margaret. Do we have a second? Okay, so we have a second by Robin. Any more discussion on this topic? Okay, I see your lips moving, Mr. Manning, but you got it on mute. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. So all of those in favor to keep the rider the same.
Can we make another effort to help Mr. Manning?
Oh, here.
There
here
you
I
go.
Okay.
Scott, when you talk about the revenue and expense, is that addressing all 8 tranches of debt? Or just the ones we've renegotiated the contracts of the loans?
Yes, it represents all expenses.
Okay.
Any more questions by anybody else?
So last I heard, you had a motion, a second, and you're about to take a vote, I think.
We did have discussion for Mr. Manning about for all 8, but yeah.
Okay, so any more discussion? Okay, so we have a motion, a second. All of those in favor, aye, and raise your hand. Okay, motion carries 5-0.
All right, thank you, board. So next topic on the agenda is the 2026 board election policies and procedures, and there'll be a vote requested on this as well. This information was in your board pack last week, and just to put this in context, this goes back to last summer. The board decided to have a special election, the work that went into for several months updating the bylaws to accommodate that. Then the next step in that process is the committee work, the timelines, the procedures, the policies that have to align to those bylaws. So I'll quickly give you a couple of verbal overviews of this, but this is the format you have seen for years, just a little bit more condensed and tight. So we promised we would go as hard as we can to get you a special election before the other election season started. So that's maybe main takeaway number 1, a very aggressive timeline. Assuming that the board wanted to proceed with this, we've already tentatively scheduled time with the committee next week to begin implementing this if this is approved. So the timelines are a little bit condensed, but you can see on the 2026 special election timeline on page 1 versus the regular election timeline on page 2, there really isn't much margin in between. And so the difference this year, as the committee is now empowered to monitor the entire election, we're using the same people and same resources. So we wanted to continue to be respectful and cognizant of the fact that if they're doing a special election, their focus and attention needs to be on that versus the regular election and working with those candidates. So that's the main difference here. There are a few other things in your report, but other than that, I don't think there's anything extraordinary here. I didn't receive any questions or feedback this week. So if this is consistent with what the board wanted, we're happy to move forward with the meeting next week with the committee and get them prepared to administer this election per the board's request earlier. So at this point, we will need a motion to pass something unless the board has a unified response on any edits. Happy to do those if we can, but maybe it's time for questions or a motion, whatever pleases the board.
Does anyone have questions on the special election timeline?
I'll make a motion to approve the special election and regular election timelines as presented.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any more discussion on the election timeline? Okay, so all those in favor, just raise your hand. Aye. To approve it. Okay, so motion carries 5-0 to approve the election timeline.
Just a quick question to Scott. Are we, how are we getting the word out about these elections?
The same ways of last year. It's the current conversations that goes to all members. It's the website, it's social media, it's the committee themselves. There's a lot of ways that goes out, different forms of social media. There's a lot. I wish there's just one thing I could say, but unfortunately, as you're familiar, there's a handful of ways that goes out. And so as you saw there, a lot of the announcement work begins very soon. So that's why it was critical for the board, if we want this election to occur before the regular election, to pass something this month. So thank you guys, appreciate that. So the next item is an update on the lines of credit. And tonight's update is going to be very straightforward but meaningful. But before we get into any specifics, I want to connect some of the progress we're sharing today with some recent patterns of success we've also been sharing since April of 2024. Over the past year and a half, our financial discipline has translated directly into many measurable savings for members. And tonight, I'm going to walk you through what was executed, why it matters, and how your early preparation and approval for the November budget for 2026 helped avoid more unnecessary costs. So I want to start with a thank you. And then just for clarity, as a reminder, we've been saying lines of credit in everything I write to you to kind of keep it clear in the context. This is two lenders. One has a facility of $150 million. The other has a facility of $100 million. Add them together, it's a $250 million facility. That's separate from whatever the balances are month to month. I think there was a question last month about the amount of the balance versus the amount of the facility. I just want to be using the same terminology as we move forward. So excited about that. And just to give you a quick update and some encouraging news for our members there based on what you did last month. So before we did anything, we stepped back to assess the reality of the rate environment and the impact it was having on our members. The lines of credit were carrying anywhere from 6.25 to 7.25 over the past year and change. And at the same time, we saw a narrow window coming into the 2026 budget year where if we could refinance a large portion of that, we could save the members a lot of interest expense. And so what we've been talking about for the past year and a half, paying down as much debt as we can, has a purpose. As we reduce that interest expense, those dollars can go to other more profitable places for the membership to have safe and reliable power at the lowest possible cost. So we're very focused, fixated, if you will, on reducing interest expense. That's important for us, and we've talked through that with the goal of improving the financial health of the cooperative. And this was another one of those moments. By you acting decisively in November, we've been able to move $120 million of variable rate debt. So the rates go up and down. We're not in control of it. And that put additional price risk pressure on the members. We're able to convert that into a long-term structure at 5.23. which is materially better than anything the cooperative was able to get in the past few years. I'm talking over 100 basis points there, and I'm going to show you what those 100 basis points are worth here in just a little bit. But the only real decision in this was timing. It was obviously a no-brainer. The sooner it got done, the more members could save, which allowed us to present to you last month the lowest possible cost budget for 2026, which gave us the greatest odds of getting through 2026 without a rate increase. So a lot of things have to go our way, but this is one of the critical steps. And I personally want to echo our appreciation of the board for coming prepared to November to look at the budget, to ask some hard, good questions, and to also allow us a path to make that more likely. So that's the backdrop for the next two slides. I will go ahead and fill you in on this. We've got it scheduled, and we're scheduled to close later this month at these rates. So very excited, and there's no way we could have got that done had this even been approved today for December. If you had approved this today, we'd be trying to get it in January. And so I'll show you what that's worth and what your proactive approach saved the members. But one thing I want you to remember is how you feel about 5.23% today. It may feel good. It may feel good or bad later. It doesn't matter, because the difference between that variable rate and a fixed rate, members or lenders are always going to have a premium on that. So we captured a lower rate. And what you did in December alone by approving that saved the members an additional $102,000 just for the month of December. If they had gotten pushed out to January, that'd be $204,000. So that's real money. I know it's only $102,000, but every one of these counts. The team's working so hard on so many things, even smaller than that sometimes. And so it's encouraging when everybody is putting their best foot forward. And this was clearly a case of the board coming prepared, proactive, looking at the big picture, agreeing that, hey, if we reduce that risk, just like we reduced our risk on power supply, just like we reduced our risk on the Winter Storm Uri debt, doing the same thing here gives us more rate stability. So having that large interest rate exposure out there would have presented the possibility of a 2026 rate action just due to that, had interest rates gone against us. So I'm thankful that we don't have to have that discussion. And I'm thankful that this structure gives us predictability. It helps us reduce volatility. It helps us reduce risk, but it does something even more important to that. And this is something that's encouraging to me and the leadership team. As we looked at the lines of credit, said, hey, we're operating the system as lean as we can. There's nothing left to cut that doesn't get into safety or reliability at the lowest possible long-term cost. We also want to make progress on the lines of credit. Yes, in 2024, we stopped the bleeding. We stopped leaning on it. That's good. Yes, in 2025, we made significant progress paying it down. I'm ecstatic about that and the work that happened to go into that to get those results. But it's never enough for a CEO. We always want more. And in this case, we look at that line of credit and go, hey, if that wasn't there, what could we do with that money for our members? And I'll go back to our system coordination project, something that can help reliability. We could give them sooner. So as I look at the lines of credit now, I know, hey, they have a maturity date. After they get refinanced later this month, there will come a time in our future, in our careers, when it's no longer hanging over our heads. It's no longer a burden to the members. So in addition to saving money, it provided hope. It provided encouragement for rate stability. And I just want to pause here and say thank you. I really appreciate you authorizing that in November. You had every right to think about it and decide in December to do it or not do it. And I completely respect that. And I can also appreciate that the board did it, was proactive. Your timing made a difference and it benefited the members. So just wanted to say thank you. This wasn't a voting topic, but I thought it's a six-figure savings for 1 month. It was worth the members hearing more about. So thank you guys for that. I appreciate your willingness to look ahead and help us do the hard things. Thank you. The next topic I want to talk the board through is the approach we're thinking about to strengthen the governance framework. Now, this is not a complete rewrite of everything the board does. I think it'd be a more phased, steady approach to to bring additional clarity, consistency, and alignment to how the board operates as a board. The work already done to this point in benchmarking and looking at what sources and resources are available for us, I think it behooves us just to acknowledge right now that Tri-County Electric is serving over 144,000 active meters, and the people behind those meters. It qualifies as the 14th largest electric cooperative in the nation. I'm sure you'd agree that our governance practices should match that level of responsibility and be commensurate with that. So in recent months, the board's already taken steady work to work on some historic practices and modernize areas that could be due for attention. Part of that can already be seen by how you've set up the Credentials and Elections Committee to be independent and to have more autonomy over the elections. Things like that are very visible. There's other work that you've done that's been less visible to the public, and I understand that. While I get the benefit of seeing that, some of the work that you're going to do here will also become visible to key stakeholders, lenders, and in some sense, even to members in the committee and others. So what we're going to be doing now is giving a stronger foundation so that future directors, they inherit something cleaner, a clear starting line, maybe more reliable than perhaps what any of you here had to start with. And let's be honest, every one of you walked into a situation that required perhaps more self-awareness, more effort, more resilience than a board really should ever have to deal with. So what you're doing now is going to assure that future directors, they don't inherit chaos. They can start on solid ground. You can give solid handoffs to where it won't be a scramble. And that's just one more thing as a board that you should really be proud of, along with all the other cooperative accomplishments. So I want to be steady, transparent, collaborative. You're going to see drafts. You're going to have the full opportunity to shape them, to prioritize them, to ask hard questions. And ultimately, when you're done with that process, approve policies that make sense and reflect how this board wants to govern themselves. Beginning tonight with 3 specific votes I'm going to ask for to assign me clear direction to bring back to you for January. So I'm going to skip through some background slides really quickly. Historically, and this is not a Tri-County thing, this is a cooperative industry thing, many board governance materials were probably useful and appropriate at one point in time, but as time changed, things need to change with it, whether it's regulation, technology, laws, synergies, economies of scale. A lot of things that were built in the 1930s needed to be more updated than perhaps many of them were. It's not a critique of the industry or cooperative or even this board or historic boards. It's simply a natural byproduct of many years of evolving practices, technology, regulation, without a consistent path to revisit policies on a regular cadence for what that may look like. So what we have a chance to do now is to modernize your policies with a scale appropriate for this size cooperative. And in most cases, cooperatives end up with a few dozen documents. Some call them board policies, other call them things similar to that, but they're written at different times by different people, maybe in different formats. So unfortunately, many boards have struggled with 2 problems: keeping up with them and keeping them current. Some have struggled with managing to the exception when an event occurs and that board will write a really good policy that deals with that event. But if you don't see that event again for several years, it can kind of fade to the back of the memory and you can wonder why it's even here or what needs to happen for it to be appropriate or practical at this point. So what I have seen be very successful at previous cooperatives I've worked with and others that I've worked for is to incorporate something in the upcoming books we previously discussed. I want to lean into the board's existing software. We use this software, and my recommendation is going to be take whatever you come up with and let's put it there for starters. And this solves 2 things permanently and immediately. First, every board member has access to every policy or procedure or whatever you want to call them, anytime, anywhere. No more digging, guessing, wondering which version is correct or current. And secondly, it helps facilitate review cycles. Review cycles are important because what you put in today will be benchmarked, will be reviewed, it'll have all this industry information filtered against it, And so you're going to feel really confident on day one. Somewhere down the road, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe it's still good and maybe it's not. But by creating these review cycles, every policy gets looked at every year, every 2 years, some every 3 years, some every 6 months, and they need to have varying review dates. So having open access and having regular review dates are going to be important for all of these. This approach works just because it's simple, it's disciplined, it replaces the passive hope with planned intentionality that have been very successful for so many organizations without adding unnecessary complexity. So if that sounds reasonable for a start, then let's get started with this. And this is where I will eventually yield to the board and request a vote for something. I'm going to recommend this be an electronic thing. If you want a paper copy, fine, but there'll be some work there to keep up with it. But you need to call this thing something. As I've benchmarked dozens of other co-ops, industry associations, etc., these were the 3 names that came to the top of the list. There's nothing magical or inspired about them at all. The board certainly will or able to use synonyms or something else, but we need to have a name for this thing for future discussions as we get into board-specific policies. Did any of these names feel right to you guys? Feel the right tempo?
I like the board governance guidebook. I like that one.
Okay. Chair, I would like to yield the floor to have the board vote on selecting one of these or something else to name this, to nail it down so we can move on with a few other things that would also be helpful administratively. So if we could get a vote, I'd be appreciative.
I had a offer to make. Does the word documents, board governance documents, as a fourth title to consider?
How about Robert's Rules of Order?
Guidebook would be good. Guidebook, and your documents. I'm okay with either one.
It's really nitpicky. What I know about a charter is it calls to mind initial effort. It calls to mind project cycles. It calls to mind very measurable milestones, and we have those, but our board governance is really process based for me. And then a manual, where it falls short on that for me is it's not a how to and a to do. There will be some things that come up that aren't covered in it, and the board will need to act in its authority as those unknown events, sometimes they're called black swans, come up, things you couldn't have predicted, which is a little bit of kind of guidebook the same, right? Like this document isn't going to run the co-op. The directors will use it for guidance. So those are just some things that came to mind. I certainly am in favor of the strategy, and then wondered if wordsmithing wasn't worth the effort to describe what it is correctly, right? Because again, things will, even in my time on the board, a whole lot has come up that had never come up before. And I would hate to see that the absence of a thing created delay and distraction for the board in handling the business of the cooperative as we're charged to do, just because a specific scenario is brand new.
Makes sense. Let me offer a scenario that might help you guys come up with a title that feels good to you. And this example will not exactly apply, but the principle will. So over the past few decades in employment, and I realize board members are not employees, so the analogy will hold, but the specifics won't. Many employees, when they go to a new organization, they get something called an employee handbook. And it doesn't cover 100% of everything they're always going to need, but it covers a high percentage of many things they'll need, at least in the first few months. Some of the things they're going to learn in that employee handbook apply to the rest of their careers at that organization. And some of the things in that handbook are probably going to be updated every year with new phrases of them. And so there's this tension between static and dynamic that, maybe a few of those things get updated over time. Yeah, let's look at this in a similar context. This board's going to vote on some name and some specific policies this board makes sense to you. Future boards may tweak things here and there, and you may tweak some of these things through time, and you may like some of those policies so well you never want to change them. I think there's going to be some of both in there. And so I like the idea of whatever this thing is, there's pages, paragraphs, sections, whatever you want to call the miniature parts of it, that are going to be reviewed regularly, annually, biannually, every 3 years, whatever it may be. So I think there's a framework to get a title that makes sense to you, where you're going to be updating parts of it, and parts of it you're going to feel really good for longer periods of time. So with that in mind, I've heard a couple of variations of these, or one of these in particular. Need to pick one or something like it and move on to item number 2. So what's the board's pleasure?
May I ask whose idea was this topic? Who brought this up?
Well, I mean, as a board last month, we had discussed once we're done with the bylaws, then we move into the board policies, because a lot of the things that were in our bylaws weren't supposed to be there. So then we had to redo board policy. So this was on our schedule to start doing this.
So
we'll
this
probably have 20
this
board
was
policies
your
to
idea?
look at.
This was your direction, Summer?
Well, it's the next step after our bylaws. We rewrote our bylaws, so we removed a lot of things that needed to be in board policies. So this was the next step. I mean, it's not necessarily that it was my idea. It has to be done because we changed our bylaws.
We still have Robert's Rules of Order as our direction.
We have board policies in effect right now. That's what we are modifying. So that's why we're doing this. So I'm okay with board governance guidebook or documents. I'm okay with either one. Does anybody, Dawn, do you have any input before we vote or somebody makes a motion?
I have no heartburn with guidebook. Governance manual seems like it's pretty staid and stoic. Thou shalt. Guidebook is more flexible. Going forward, appears to be or lends itself to being changed a little bit easier, as opposed to basically the Bible of governance.
Okay, so do we have a motion for one and we can take a vote?
I move for the vote of the name Board Governance Guidebook.
I second it.
Okay, any more discussion on the topic? Okay, so all of those in favor of Board Governance Guidebook, raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all of those opposed? Okay, so motion carries 4-0, Board Governance Guidebook.
4-1.
Oh, 4-1, sorry.
All right, so now that your document has a name, one of the first things I would anticipate if I opened up, whether it's an employee handbook or your document, is something up front that new prospective board members would receive up front. So there was a copy or a template of a welcome letter in your board information this week. And this is from a lot of benchmarking. But the thing I want to highlight for your attention, near the bottom, there's a little bit of a handoff here. Think of a track team that's got the baton and a relay. There's an acknowledgement and receipt that many organizations will want up front, saying, hey, we acknowledge we've given you this information. We've gone over it with you, whatever that may look like. I think some of the best practices include giving them this manual, your guidebook, getting them to sign this letter, and then perhaps sitting down and having an in-person meeting and just kind of flipping through the pages where the board can orient new board members. Hey, pay attention to this one or look out for that or whatever it may be. So I think that opens itself up to future verbal discussions as well. But one of the best practices that I saw was the acknowledgement portion there. And so at this point, I haven't had any feedback on this. If the board doesn't have heartburn over that, and if you do, you can certainly edit the letter over time. But I would recommend a typical traditional welcome letter with some form of acknowledgement near the bottom of it. If that makes sense, I'd like to get a vote either way, just so I can know how to begin constructing your document. And so I would ask for a vote on this as well.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve this? I mean, you're going to make some edits, obviously, because we just changed the name of our, it's not called board governance manual.
I had to take the guess. Exactly.
Okay, well, obviously you're going to edit that.
Yes, ma'am. So this is the template, and obviously over time, the board's welcome to make edits. Typically, this is probably something looked at annually or once every 2 years, something like that. So with that in mind, if the board has a motion and choose to vote, be happy to move on to your next topic.
I move that we accept it as presented, knowing that we can change it at will.
Absolutely.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any more discussion on this topic?
Yes, I'm going to vote for it, but under Robert's Rules of Order, the past year, the board's neglected to abide by that, and that's one reason I think this may be a useless effort. And if you want examples, I can write them up.
So you have a motion and a second.
So I had a question. I think there are some other initiating documents for new board members.
Yes.
Why would you segregate? Okay, go ahead.
So good question. So there are a handful or more of new board member documents, and they're getting those now through the committee. That includes everything from consent confidentiality agreements, background check authorizations, your typical IRS 990 disclosures, and other things of that nature. They're coming in through that. And as a board, you're certainly entitled to make sure they're also included here as well. And in fact, putting them in this document as an appendix and maybe looking at those every year, deciding, do we need to tweak, add, remove anything? It might not be a bad thing to also incorporate all of those in here as well. For the past year and a half, we've been handling that offline as that committee got set up, but it might make a lot of great synergy to include all of them in here and say, let the board review and revise those annually, biannually, something of that nature. Nothing wrong with that. And I'll take that as an action item to do that unless the board objects.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Don, will you?
Go ahead.
I was going to ask Don if he'd want to amend his motion or talk about it any further.
I'm willing to amend it. What amendment? How do you want the amendment to read?
Just perhaps that your motion is to accept the acknowledgement form as presented with an additional appendix, including other initiating documents.
So moved.
Okay, so we had a second, so we need a, Robin, you are a second on that? Okay, so any more discussion on it? Okay, so all of those in favor, just raise your hand and an aye. So motion carries 5-0.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So now that your document has a name, now that you have a table of contents and some appendices information as well that can also be reviewed over time as the board pleases, the next thing I would anticipate in a document like this is something like a table of contents, and call it what you will. And I've got a sample here. I've pre-populated this particular draft table of contents, again, based on dozens of cooperatives of like size across the nation, based on industry associations, based on a lot of other inputs, and ranked them according to their severity in other organizations. Now, this list can obviously, number one, vary over time, because even if you like a policy and you pass a policy in January, you're going to have at the bottom of that policy, you want to review it in 12 months, 18 months, 24, whatever, so on and so forth for every page or every chapter or every part of your document. So with that in mind, this can flex a little bit over time. I don't think there's anything magical or inspired about the number 20 versus 19 or 21, for example. These were the concepts that come up most often, that resonate most often. Any two cooperatives could vary a little bit. There's a tension here between static and dynamic. And depending on what portions of each of these draft policy titles you include, there's parts of this you could argue goes with that one and parts of it go with that one. That's a board's discretion on where you're going to put those specific parts. That's one of the benefits of reviewing all of these on a regular basis. Pretty much at every board meeting going forward, once you get a dozen, 15 or 20 of these policies in place, you could count on probably one per month. And so if a policy overlaps with another policy on a similar or comparable topic, or if it has an impact on it, even if you're not reviewing that one that month, you're cognizant of the one you just reviewed the month prior or a couple of months prior. So hopefully it never gets too far out of sync. They're always consistent. And number, whatever, I'll pick a random number, 15 pops up, and you decide, hey, something happened out of cycle. We need to look at 15 now. The board could certainly do that. And if you take action on that, you might decide, hey, if we do this, it might impact number 10. And the board could certainly pull that out of the order of the queue of the schedule as well. So with that in mind, these are the 20 concepts I believe sister cooperatives have proven need to be there. And what I can tell you with a lot of authority is this: as you get closer to the top of this list, we're a whole lot more certain for a whole lot more reasons, whether it's your insurance company, laws, etc. That's probably less flexible. The closer you get to the bottom of this list, it's probably more gray. That's not 100%, but it's probably a high likelihood of that or something like that. So with that in mind, my recommendation is, well, where do we get started? Based on what we've seen in the preponderance of research, I recommend the first 4 here. You assigned me to bring you those back in January, but under a 2-part approach. These are probably 4 of the most concerning to make sure you stay in good tune with your insurance policy, stay reasonably close to the industry standards. And if these 4 are going well, a lot of the ones below them also typically go well, and vice versa. When these don't go well, the ones below them typically don't go well. Now, I realize you've got to do all the research to get to that point, and we also want the board to have a large sense of control and flexibility over this. My recommendation is these 4 come back in January with specific drafts that you revise, edit, redo, whatever it may be. But also at the same time, I recommend 1 Word document and call this a parking lot. While you may acknowledge, yeah, these are the 4 most pressing priority, the most concerning, risky things, you may have thoughts, experiences, or preferences on item number 12 or 16 or 18 or 8. I think we need to keep an eye on that and not lose it. And the best way, 1, transparency for each other, and 2, to help make sure we prioritize, is to put those all in a parking lot that you look at every month, add to, take away, whatever it may be. it'd be a lot easier for me if I put myself in your shoes. If I have a lot of experience or thoughts on one of these policies that's at the bottom of the list, if I know my fellow board members could see it and we've got our finger on that page in the book, so to speak, we know it's not going to get overlooked. And so that can capture a lot of thoughts and allow you to focus on whatever is at the top of the list. So with that in mind, my recommendation is that you assign me drafts for the top 4, which I've already started on a lot of those. We have a lot of good information in hand. So this is not a throwing the baby and the bathwater out situation. This is not a reinventing the wheel. This is making sure none of these things contradict with each other and that the things that are most important to you are done first. I suspect this is going to take 4 to 5 months to get a quantity like this worked through and do the work required to do it. And the reason I'm going to pause on that is I could write drafts of these probably and get them to you by next week if that's what you wanted. But if I were in your shoes, knowing what I know now, I would not accept that from me because I also realize how much work is required to benchmark this appropriately, how much work is required to make sure this is consistent with your D&O policy, how much work is required to look at industry associations and what's worked or not worked in other places, and what might need to be different here, slightly here or there. So there's a lot of work if we're going to do this well. It'll probably take about 4 months to get it set up. But as you do it, you'll have a schedule of the next couple of years of when each one could be reviewed on schedule unless something changes, regulation, technology, laws, etc. So that's my recommendation. But here I need to stop and defer to the board. If that makes sense, if that tracks with you, I'll come back in January with drafts of those 4. As soon as we can get reasonable drafts that are benchmarked, obviously I give them to you sooner. But you get them at least a week before the board meeting. So questions about this phase of the process?
I have a point of clarity to make and inquire. So we have existing policies, and it seems with document refresh schedules, we put in the work for that sometime back. But it seems that another element of work you or the staff would need to do is to help get the pieces of each of those policies to conform to some of these headings that are proposed, and then create a retirement of the policy, of the existing policy. And that my question is then, is that part of the work you were describing? Okay.
Yeah, in fact, that's a very good summary because Tri-County Electric is one of the cooperatives I'm benchmarking because you're right, there are some legacy policies that deal with many of these topics and others like them. So Tri-County is certainly one of those being benchmarked as well. So if the board puts in policy number 1, for instance, Margaret's correct that we'd have to go back to the legacy document, strike through that one and replace it with this and the new policy number 1 next review date. So as we work through this list, there will also be a systematic, the board will retire the old version of whatever that may be that it's replacing or updating. And in many cases, a lot of what's already there might work just fine. You just want to look at it a lot of today and make sure, are we missing anything? Has anything changed since then? And so a lot of that may be very useful. But whatever you have at the end of this, you're crossing other things off as you go. So at the end of month 1, if you approve 4 policies, I expect there's going to be about 4 mark throughs of the other and they're replaced. So maybe at the end of the 4th, 5th, 6th month, you have these and the old ones are gone. So it's a good point, and it is part of the benchmarking, why it takes so much work.
Correct, because we have a very important policy that on a cursory look does not seem to fit any of the titles suggested here. And so the work of retiring the policies is important for the board to take on because that policy would be remaining without a replacement solution, which would be a good time for the board to reassess it.
Agreed. And that's another benefit of the parking lot. It makes sure that none of those cross in the night, if you will. So as the new ones come on and some of the old ones may be retired, that's an excellent opportunity to make sure, does that leave any gaps? And so it's a nice overlap to make sure there are no gaps during the process. And then for sure once it's implemented, you've got reviews and it's right there and everybody can touch it. So yes to all of that. With that in mind, do these 4 make sense to start with? Would you like to go down on the list a little further?
Are you wanting the board to approve the full table of contents or give you the quote unquote starting 4?
I would prefer the starting 4 circled in red now. And the way I would look at it, maybe 5 through 20 or whatever 20 becomes, I'm going to say that's written in pencil, because it may be that as a result of the process we just described with the retirements, this turns into 22, or several of them can be combined into 18. I don't know. Either of those is equally plausible. So what I'm going to ask for is the board assign me 1 through 4 and to create a parking lot for thoughts, opinions, preferences any of you have on those, so that you can be assured in front of all the board that it's there. And when you get to policy number, whatever, 10 or 15, you've got your thoughts there and it's not lost in the transition, if you will. So 1 through 4 and a parking lot for 5 through whatever the limit is. That's the package recommendation.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, any more discussion on this? Okay, so all those in favor of going with the first 4 and then a parking lot for the rest, modifying the first 4? All those in favor, raise your hand. Aye. Okay, so opposed. The motion carries 5-0.
Perfect. And I'll zoom through. That's the last vote I need for tonight. So I've got some action items to bring you guys next month. Looking forward to it. Already started working on them. Here are those titles just in larger font, and I'll just kind of zoom through. While the page showing here to you will not be available to the public because there are specific names on it, I wanted to give you a sample of a lot of the industry associations that have been looked at so far. I won't say their names, but I want to give you a feel for the days on end already just to get to this point, and the tentative draft already for the first couple of policies. It gives me comfort to know that, one, we don't have to recreate the wheel. There's probably nothing we're going to come up with that somebody else hasn't already wrestled with. And it certainly remains in the board's purview of what needs to be tweaked to fit Tri-County Electric situations specifically. So I'll continue to be mindful of that. I'll continue to give you both sides of pros and cons. I'll continue to give you benchmarked information that you can work from. And we'll start in January with the parking lot, with the document title this board selected, with the first 4 policies drafted. And I look forward to bringing that back to you in January. If we're able to get some done prior to the week of the board meeting, I'll certainly give you as much time as we can on those, but we'll try to maintain our policy of getting to you a week in advance at least, to give you 168 hours to look it over, think it through, and ask any questions that you may have. So thank you guys for your patience and your persistence. It is going to be a heavy lift. I do appreciate the idea of doing it over a 4 to 5 month period. I think that makes it digestible so that you can get into the weeds on different topics that are important to you and appropriately have a good board vetting and hopefully be confident what you're done with and how you can help new board members start off on solid ground. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Chair, with your permission, we'll move on to item number 8, the Credentials and Election Committee compensation recommendations. So this was in your report. I'm happy to put that on the screen if that might help be a reference point, but I want to be cognizant of the time I've already taken. The idea is this. I'll give you a little bit of background on what we're thinking, and the board can deliberate as needed. The Credentials and Elections Committee historically met one day a year and did everything they were charged to do. At that time, they were able to do in one day. And a structure of compensation that met with that was a per diem. That kind of made sense for what they had to do then. If the board needed to adjust that up or down, they could adjust that per diem. Now, if you contrast that, because of the work the board's already done, to charge the committee to administer the election, there's a lot more work going into it now, and it doesn't always show up in meetings. Yes, they will continue to meet some, but the lion's share of the work they're going to be doing is monitoring contested elections, vetting candidates, all the things they've got to do through that entire process. And so while there is meeting time, there's a lot of time they're spending outside of meetings. And so this was the recommendation to bring to the board. Perhaps a contested election might look different than an uncontested election. And so I want to be sensitive to that. But just as a reminder, the board can see this information on your screens. And I'll pause here for any discussion or questions the board may have of each other or me, and let you guys have that space.
We would need to define contested election because, for example, in the last election cycle, it started one way and ended another.
If the board wants to use a contested and non-contested election, I'd be happy to offer some thoughts you guys can think about right now on the spot if you'd like. Perhaps the definition of contested would be how the process ends or how it is at a critical point. The idea behind the contested election is there's multiple candidates, multiple campaigns, multiple things to monitor across different platforms and ways. So it is undeniably more work, but you raise an excellent point. At what point would you define it as contested? And I would contend from a majority of the communication expense incurred when the materials get published by the third-party vote administrator. At that point, a lot of the cooperative expense has already been incurred. So that could certainly be a critical point. Alternatively, the board could decide at the end of the process of the election if it's still contested at the end. Those seem to be the most two logical buoys. There could be other thoughts as well.
Will this save us money or cost us money?
The pace you're on right now, it's hard to tell. What I can tell you is what the board did last month with the bylaws saved you money because you don't have runoff elections. So that's a positive. This is more paying for time, not paying for a meeting. It gives a clearer signal for what they can expect when they sign up. Because one of the first questions they ask, and you could anticipate this as well, well, how much time does this take? And unfortunately, there's no complete or comprehensive answer that can be provided because it depends on the number of candidates in the process, right? So some concept of pay for the performance of the job versus pay for the time seems appropriate and consistent, but saving or making money here is probably not part of the calculus.
What happens with like the special election we're proposing for next year?
Our proposal is something like this or whatever the board decides for each election, because that's a lot of work for that part. So we're going to have a spring election, the board authorized earlier. They're going to have to do all this vetting of the candidates, all the filtering, screening, interviewing, all that work. They're going to be meeting, working, doing all the work. My recommendation is for an election, whatever you do with this recommendation is the way to go.
Have we had complaints from existing members of the committee?
You've had questions from committee members and prospective committee members. I mean, just like you would feel if you signed up for a job and they said, we'll pay you this much for a meeting. Well, how many meetings are required? And what do I have to do outside the meetings? And I think that last part, what needs to be done outside the meetings, is really the part that you may want to deliberate on.
Why don't we ask them for input on this?
Mr. Manning, we've met with the committee and I'm bringing you the concerns here. I want to be as careful as I can, so I'm going to defer to the board at this point.
I haven't heard any complaints from my appointee. Matter of fact, he'd probably do it for nothing. So I'm not sure we need to change anything.
Scott, can I just ask a question? Did we get, okay, so last year, did they do like Teams meetings? They did, didn't they? But
they did a lot of Teams meetings.
They did those for
The-
free, basically, right?
I think that anytime they had a meeting, there was a per diem issued.
Okay.
And so I thought you were going to ask a different question about the difficulty in recruiting committee members in this day and age. I'm telling you, it's come up probably more than it may sound like we're cognizant of, because today we're asking the committee to do something they didn't historically have to do. So it's one of those things you may want to think about as far as having a special election and then having a regular election. A pay per meeting may work, but you're asking them to monitor social media and other things between meetings. And so if you feel good about that, we can move on. But this was the last item we had to put before the board tonight.
So do we have any input from anybody else or a motion to approve it or not approve it? I mean, if we didn't approve this, Scott, are we just going to keep it at the meeting they had? It's
And it's per meeting. So right now they're getting paid per meeting. Thankfully, and this is something I talked to a lot of people in the industry that are considering jobs. One of the things that I talk to them about is, hey, you want to look for a committee or a board that will work on a per monthly fee rather than a per meeting fee. When you look at organizations that go south, they're incentivized per meeting rather than per what needs to be done. So on one hand, I want to make sure they're fairly compensated. On the other hand, I'd hate to unintentionally put a system in place that may motivate meetings that might not always be necessary. I'm not saying that's happened here. I'm just saying that's the dynamic between a fixed pay and a variable pay compensation system that the board needs to come to comfort with one way or the other.
Why don't we ask our appointees and then bring this up at a future meeting?
They will be here Thursday. Would you like us to do that then? Well, they may come.
I'm talking about each of our board members talk to their appointees.
Summer, do you have a plan for those who are not represented currently? Summer, I think you're muted.
We ought to get a good idea with five.
Summer, I think you were
five
muted.
members.
Well, I was going to say there's only 5 of us and there's 9 of them. So I mean,
We ought to get a decent feel with just talking to 5.
does anybody else have any thoughts on it? Okay, so does somebody want to make a motion? We talk to them, or we keep it the same, or we,
How does this affect the budget we just worked through last month? This would change that line item, but I'm not nimble enough to pull it up mid-discussion.
Yeah, you don't have to. You can take that per meeting fee and go, okay, you're betting they'll have divided by this number, that many or less meetings. Maybe some committees will, maybe some committees won't. There is no
I did that
history.
math and it offsets
6.
12 meetings of 9 people, but my question's about the line item in the budget.
It's
I
going to
don't
come from this
recall.
line. It's going to come from this line, no matter which way you do it. It's the committee. It's are we over or under budgeting? And there's no way to know that at this point because you don't know how contested the election may be. You don't know how much work they may have to do to maintain it, to monitor it. There's no way to know because there's no precedent of contested elections where they fully have to administer all the things they're going to do. So we just don't have a way to know. This was recommended based on the math you just did of recent history, if it did teach us anything. So that kind of influenced this. So I've heard
I mean, if
each
we
of you,
so you said they get paid $50 a meeting and they're typically, I mean, right now we're going to do 2 elections. So let's just say they're going to probably meet once a month. for the next 12 months. They probably won't have a choice at this point almost, and that'll be dollars. I mean, so right now it sounded like it's in our benefit to not go ask them and give them a set fee because we're going to come out cheaper. I'm not trying to be cheap. I know it's time. Am I reading that wrong, Scott, or?
Nope, you're reading it right.
Okay.
It's a matter of, it's just a matter of how you want to incentivize them. Do you want to incentivize them to do the job or to have meetings?
And so then next, would you pay them all this money up front, or you would pay them to the end of the year, their whole?
It
If
says
you
in
went to
here
a-
half and half.
Oh, two
It says half
installments.
and
I'm
half.
sorry.
But I have some hesitation with regard to the special election. I have some hesitation of what I understood in our earlier conversation, that we would just double this. We'd pay each election as an election.
So here's the
obvious-
current thinking. Tell me what doesn't resonate to you. Starting next week in December, they're going to work from then through April the 6th on the special election. They're going to get compensated however you determine. And starting shortly after that, they're going to work from then through, I think it was October, if I remember correctly, September, October, on a regular election. They're going to be compensated however you determine is most appropriate. That's going to happen either way if you leave it a per diem or a per month.
With my fellow board members, first of all, is anyone else thinking about that? We just passed a budget that I wasn't considering this expense there, right, for next year, and it's upon us. If I'm the only one, I'll take responsibility for my own thoughts independently, but if I'm not, perhaps it warrants additional discussion.
So there's pros and cons of either way. If you want budget certainty, you do a per fee for the election. If you would rather have the per meeting concept, it may work out, it may not for either the committee member or the cooperative, but it certainly introduces more risk. But either one sends a signal as well it sends a signal for them, either way. So I do need clarity because they're coming here next week. So one way or the other, I just need the board to let me know what's your pleasure.
Just leave it alone.
Each election will replace 3 seats. Each special election would have its own count of seats. Perhaps a proration makes sense, but I did hear you, Mr. Manning. You said, leave it alone.
Is there any scenario where we have two elections running simultaneously?
Theoretically, but the odds are much lower of that. It's possible. And you've got 2 structures here, keeping what you've got or going to this. Either one of those can accommodate that if the board wanted 2 elections overlap. And I'm going to pitch this straight down the middle of the plate. I don't want to influence the board here either way. I want you to be aware of the pros and the cons, the signals they send, and the impact it has to your budget. If you've got a good handle on those and you like the outcome, then I'm satisfied I did my job to bring it to your attention. So whatever the board wills, I would like to hear a motion, a second, and a vote on anything.
I'm not speaking for everyone, but I want to suggest to the board that what I've taken from this conversation is that Scott feels like he would like to give an update on this topic to the committee beginning as soon as next week. But I'm hearing some hesitation from the board to move at this time. And I'm wondering if the right answer may be for Scott to tell the committee that we're considering this. Need a little more time. Should we adopt it, clear communications will be sent forward. And then for us, for the math, if we continue to pay them per meeting in the interim of making a final decision, we could always deduct from the flat payment schedule. And I would love to know if anyone else is hearing this conversation similarly. I'm good. I have a motion if you're ready for it, Summer.
Okay, go ahead.
My motion is to adopt the recommended Credentials and Election Committee compensation schedule with 2 modifications from what has been presented. One, to retain their mileage reimbursement, and the other is to prorate the 2026 special election to 2/3 of the value to reflect 2 seats filled, not 3.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, I have a second by Robin. Any more discussion? Okay, all of those in favor, aye, raise your hand. Okay, Dawn, your hand's raised, right? Okay, and opposed? So motion carries 4-1.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes all the regular business we had prepared. I appreciate your all's flexibility. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas. Excited to get done with this work for you, bring it back in January, and look forward to seeing everybody soon. Be safe.
Okay, that concludes the open session portion of our meeting. Everyone have a nice evening.